In the heart of the city, in a luxurious mansion that seemed more like a palace, lived a billionaire whose life was the dream of many. Every corner of his home was filled with priceless art, sparkling chandeliers, and furniture imported from distant countries. From the outside, his life looked perfect. He had everything money could buy, yet inside, there was a quiet loneliness that no wealth could fill. His days followed a precise routine, each moment planned and executed with the efficiency of a man used to controlling every detail of his life. He woke up early, long before the sun touched the skyline, and began his morning with a strict workout followed by a shower in a bathroom larger than most apartments. Breakfast was often a carefully prepared meal, though more for the sake of habit than enjoyment. His schedule was packed with meetings, phone calls, and decisions worth millions, and he moved through it all with confidence and authority. Never once did he stop to think about the people who worked tirelessly around him, people whose lives and struggles were hidden behind the walls of his mansion. Among those people was his maid, a quiet and diligent woman who had served his family for many years. She knew the mansion like the back of her hand and moved through it silently, completing tasks with precision, from cleaning the vast rooms to organizing the wardrobes. Her work went unnoticed most of the time, yet, despite her loyalty and dedication, she remained invisible in his world, a shadow in the glittering corridors of wealth. The billionaire prided himself on being observant, believing he understood everything about his home and the people in it. He thought he knew their habits, their moods, even their personal lives, but in reality, there was a distance he could never cross, an invisible wall that separated his life of luxury from the quiet struggles of those who served him. He had grown so used to his privileges that he never imagined anyone living under his roof might face challenges unknown to him. Even in his interactions with his maid, there was a subtle distance, a formality that kept their worlds separate. He would speak politely, give instructions, or ask for things to be done, but he rarely paused to ask how she was, what her dreams were, or what worries she might carry. It wasn't cruelty. It was simply the blindness of someone who had lived in comfort all his life. The reality of her life, and the sacrifices she made quietly every day, never crossed his mind. Despite this, there was something about him that drew people in, his presence, his charm, the aura of power and confidence that surrounded him. People admired him, envied him, and sometimes feared him, but few truly knew him. Few could see the loneliness that hid behind his sharp suits, the endless nights of silence in a home full of objects but empty of warmth. His wealth had built walls around him, not just of marble and glass, but of pride and isolation. Yet life has a way of revealing truths in the most unexpected ways, and the billionaire's carefully controlled world was about to change. The mansion, the luxury, and the meticulous routines could not shield him from the realities that lay just beyond his awareness. The people who moved quietly around him, unnoticed and underappreciated, carried stories that would shake his perspective and touch his heart in ways he never imagined. For now, he continued his day as usual, unaware that an ordinary act, a simple moment in the hospital, would soon expose a hidden truth. The life he thought he understood was only a fraction of the world around him, and soon, he would discover a story that no amount of money could erase from his memory. A story that would not only reveal the resilience and courage of someone he had overlooked but also awaken a side of him he had long forgotten, the side capable of empathy, compassion, and deep human connection. The maid was nothing like the people in the billionaire's world. She moved through life quietly, her presence almost invisible, yet every action she took carried weight. She started her mornings long before the mansion woke, slipping through the silent hallways with a soft determination that made her seem like a ghost. Her hands worked quickly and skillfully, arranging everything just as it should be, polishing surfaces until they gleamed, folding clothes with care, and preparing rooms for the day ahead. Each task was done without complaint. Yet beneath her calm exterior, she carried the weight of responsibilities that no one in the mansion could ever see. She had her own story, one that was hidden beneath her simple uniform and humble demeanor. Behind her gentle eyes was a life of struggle, a family depending on her every paycheck, and sacrifices that went unnoticed. She rarely spoke of it, keeping her burdens tucked away as neatly as the linens she folded. The world outside the mansion was harsh and unforgiving, but within its walls, she had to maintain composure, presenting herself as calm and capable no matter what storms were raging in her personal life. Her day began with the careful orchestration of the mansion. Knowing exactly where everything needed to be, she moved like a conductor in an invisible symphony, making sure every detail was perfect. The billionaire rarely noticed these things, assuming that everything ran smoothly because it always had, yet each small action carried countless hours of thought, planning, and effort. Every polished floor, every neatly arranged tray, every room ready for inspection was a testament to her discipline and dedication. Despite her quiet efficiency, the maid had moments of fatigue and longing, moments when the weight of her responsibilities threatened to overwhelm her. She would pause for a breath, glance out the window at the city beyond, and remind herself why she persevered. Every decision she made, every long hour she worked, was for the family who depended on her. For them, she endured long shifts, sleepless nights, and sacrifices that would go unrecognized by the wealthy household she served. She carried their hopes in her heart, a silent strength that fueled her every step. No one in the mansion knew about her secret life outside of work, the hospital visits she made, or the worries that never left her mind. The billionaire thought he knew everything about her, but in truth, he only saw what she allowed him to see. Her struggles were hidden behind her polite smile and unwavering composure. She had learned long ago that vulnerability was dangerous in a world that often judged people by appearances. And in the mansion, appearances were everything. Yet her routine was not just about work, it was also about survival and resilience. She managed her life with a quiet courage, balancing duties at the mansion with the pressing needs of her family. Every errand she ran, every appointment she attended, was carefully planned to avoid detection and to ensure that she could keep providing for those who depended on her. There was a rhythm to her life, a disciplined order that allowed her to survive the pressures of two very different worlds. Her interactions with the billionaire were limited and polite, but even in those brief exchanges, she had to be careful, reading his moods, anticipating his requests, and maintaining her composure. She had mastered the art of invisibility, moving through the mansion without disrupting the perfection he demanded. Every smile, every nod, every completed task was part of a delicate balance, ensuring her life could continue without friction. And yet, despite all the control she exercised over her day, there was an underlying tension, a quiet anxiety that something might go wrong. She feared exposure, judgment, or interference, because the life she led outside the mansion depended on secrecy and careful timing. Each day was a tightrope walk between two worlds, one of luxury and one of hardship, and she navigated it with precision, never allowing either to collapse under her watch. Even in her moments of exhaustion, she found small joys. A quiet conversation with a nurse at the hospital, a small thank you from a patient's family, or a rare smile from her own children, reminders that her sacrifices had meaning. Her strength came not from wealth or privilege, but from love, loyalty, and determination, qualities invisible to the billionaire but essential to the life she led. And so, her days continued in perfect routine, a silent dance of duty and devotion, each step a testament to her resilience, and unknowingly, each day brought her closer to a moment that would change everything, a day when her secret world and the billionaire's controlled universe would collide, exposing truths that had been hidden for too long, truths that would challenge assumptions, awaken empathy, and break the barriers between wealth and humanity. The billionaire had always prided himself on being observant, on noticing the smallest details that others might overlook. He believed he understood everything about his household, from the timing of meals to the habits of the staff. Yet, over the past few weeks, he began to notice tiny changes in his maid's behavior, small cracks in her otherwise flawless routine. At first, they seemed insignificant. A late return from an errand, a distracted glance, a hurried whisper on the phone, but they planted a seed of curiosity that grew stronger with each passing day. He watched her more closely, trying to catch the source of her distraction. Something was clearly troubling her, yet she did not confide in anyone, not in the staff, not in him, and not even in her rare moments of conversation. The billionaire felt a mix of irritation and intrigue, irritation at the disruption of the smooth operation of his home, and intrigue at the mystery of her secret life. He was used to control, and anything that eluded it demanded attention. His suspicion began subtly at first, a passing thought that maybe she was hiding something trivial, a personal errand or a minor family matter, but as days passed, the signs became harder to ignore. He noticed her avoiding eye contact at times, moving more quickly when she thought she was unobserved, and whispering into her phone in hushed tones. His mind raced with possibilities, ranging from the mundane to the dramatic. He could not allow himself to dismiss it without knowing the truth. One afternoon, he saw her leave the mansion with a purposeful stride, holding her bag tightly, her expression tense yet determined. Something in her manner was unusual. Unlike the calm composure she always displayed, the billionaire's curiosity transformed into a quiet determination to uncover the secret she was hiding. He was not motivated by suspicion of wrongdoing, but by a deep, unspoken need to understand, to know what lay behind the eyes of someone he had trusted for so long. That evening, he found himself lingering near the windows, pretending to review documents while keeping a careful eye on her movements. Each step she took outside the gates felt amplified, every glance at her watch or sudden phone call registering like a signal to him. His mind began weaving scenarios, imagining possibilities that ranged from the ordinary to the extraordinary. He felt a strange mix of anxiety and anticipation, as though he were about to witness a revelation that could not be ignored. He knew he could not simply ask her, not without risking embarrassment or forcing her to conceal even more, so he made a decision, quiet and deliberate, to follow her without being seen. He would not confront, he would not interfere, he would only observe. The thought of this secret pursuit gave him a thrill unlike any he had felt in years, a sharp contrast to the controlled monotony of his daily life. It was a subtle rebellion against his own perfection, a step into uncertainty that both terrified and excited him. In the days leading up to that moment, he watched patterns emerge, noting the times she left, the streets she took, and the places she seemed to frequent. He felt like a detective in a story, piecing together clues that only he could perceive. Yet, despite his careful observation, he could not predict what he would find. He only knew that something significant was hidden, something that might change the way he saw the world. The tension grew inside him, a quiet pressure that made each encounter with her more intense. Even a simple smile or a polite nod carried weight, filled with the unspoken knowledge that he was now aware of secrets beyond the walls of his mansion. The billionaire had entered a new phase, no longer merely an observer of wealth and routine, but a man drawn into a deeper story, a story that belonged to someone else, a story that was about to unfold before his eyes. Little did he know that this curiosity, this growing suspicion, would lead him to a discovery so profound that it would shake him to his core, forcing him to confront truths about empathy, compassion, and the unseen struggles that even the people closest to him carried quietly. And he was about to step into a world far removed from his control, a world of raw human emotion that no amount of wealth could shield him from. The next morning, the billionaire awoke with a restless energy he had not felt in years. His mind was consumed by the previous day's observations, the small clues and unusual behavior of his maid forming a puzzle he was determined to solve. He moved through his mansion with careful precision, yet there was a spark of anticipation in his movements, a silent thrill at the idea of uncovering something hidden. He waited until she stepped out of the mansion again, her bag tucked tightly under her arm, her pace brisk and purposeful. His heart quickened as he followed at a distance, blending with the morning crowd on the streets, trying to appear casual, yet every sense was alert. Every turn she took, every street she walked down, he memorized. His usual life of boardrooms, contracts, and endless meetings seemed distant, irrelevant. Compared to this silent pursuit, it was as if he had stepped into another world, one where the rules were not his and every moment carried possibility. The streets grew narrower, quieter, a stark contrast to the bustling avenues near his mansion. He noticed her glance around cautiously, aware of her surroundings in a way that spoke of both fear and urgency. It was clear she was on a mission, but the destination remained a mystery. Each step pulled him deeper into a part of the city he rarely visited, a place where luxury did not dominate and where life moved at a different, slower rhythm. He felt out of place yet strangely alive, like someone witnessing a secret world few ever saw. She paused occasionally, checking her phone, adjusting her pace, and seeming to make silent calculations. Her demeanor was composed but intense, and the billionaire realized how little he truly knew about the discipline and resilience required to manage a life like hers. The mansion had always been a world of structure and control, yet here she navigated uncertainty with a strength that left him both impressed and humbled. He felt a stirring of respect and curiosity, emotions he rarely allowed himself to indulge. As she turned a corner, he caught sight of a familiar building in the distance, the hospital, a place he had visited rarely, a place connected to fragility, pain, and healing. His pulse quickened, not out of fear, but from the awareness that he was about to step into a story far larger than the neat boundaries of his life. He moved carefully, ensuring she would not notice his presence. Yet every step brought him closer to the revelation he had been chasing, the truth behind her secret. Passing through the hospital's crowded lobby, he observed her with a mixture of awe and apprehension. She moved with quiet purpose, heading directly to a ward he could not yet see. His curiosity burned hotter with each passing moment. He felt a tension unlike anything he had known, a sense that he was about to witness a reality that would challenge his assumptions, a reality untouched by money, status, or power. He followed her into the elevator, remaining out of sight, watching as she pressed the buttons, her expression focused yet tinged with worry. The ride felt long, each floor they passed increasing his anticipation, and his heart beat faster with every step. He realized that this was not just a secret she had been keeping from him, it was a part of her life, her heart, her humanity, that he had never considered. The corridor stretched before her, and he trailed silently, marveling at her determination. Her steps were steady, her resolve unwavering. Despite the weight she carried, he felt a strange mix of admiration, guilt, and curiosity, realizing that the comfortable life he led had shielded him from understanding the struggles of those around him. The mansion's walls had created distance, but here, in this hospital hallway, that distance evaporated, replaced by a raw awareness of human vulnerability and courage. And as she paused outside a room, hesitating briefly before entering, he knew that whatever awaited inside would change him forever. The secret trail he had followed had led him not just to a place, but to a moment of truth, a glimpse into the life of someone whose sacrifices had gone unnoticed, and whose strength had quietly shaped the world around her. For the first time, he was not the observer of wealth and control. He was a witness to life in its purest, most fragile form, and he had no idea how profoundly it would affect him. The billionaire held his breath as he watched her pause outside the hospital room. Her hand hovered briefly over the doorknob, a quiet hesitation that betrayed both fear and hope. She took a steadying breath and finally turned it, slipping inside with a grace that seemed almost deliberate. Leaving the door slightly ajar behind her, he crept closer, careful not to be seen, his heart hammering in his chest. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the air itself was charged with anticipation. Peeking through the small gap, he saw her kneel beside a hospital bed, and in that moment, the world he had built, the mansion, the wealth, the routines, seemed to disappear. There, lying frail and pale, was a figure that made his chest tighten with an unexpected ache. It was someone he had never met, yet the care in her eyes and the tenderness in her touch spoke volumes. She brushed a lock of hair from their forehead, whispered words of comfort, and adjusted the blankets with meticulous attention. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying a worry she had kept hidden for weeks. He realized, with a sudden jolt, that this was not a simple family matter, not a minor errand, but a battle she had been fighting quietly, bravely, without anyone knowing. She had been managing this hidden life alongside her duties at the mansion, shouldering burdens that would have crushed many, and doing so with a grace and strength he had never imagined. His admiration grew, but it was coupled with an unfamiliar feeling. Guilt, for the times he had assumed she was indifferent or distracted. For the moments he had dismissed her small hesitations as unimportant. As he continued to watch, he noticed the toll it had taken on her, the dark circles under her eyes, the subtle tremble in her hands, and the occasional sigh that escaped her lips told him more than any words could. She had been carrying this alone, and no one in the mansion had ever asked, no one had offered help or even noticed the strain. He felt a pang of shame, realizing how insulated he had been in his life of luxury, oblivious to the quiet heroism occurring right under his nose. Then he saw something that made his heart break completely, a moment of vulnerability. Her eyes filled with tears, a quiet sob that she tried to suppress, yet could not. She had been strong for so long, but the weight of worry, fear, and love was finally spilling over. He felt a lump in his throat, unable to look away. Each detail, the lines on her face, the tenderness of her touch, the intensity of her concern, hit him with a force that no wealth or power could shield him from. He realized she had been silently giving everything of herself to someone else's life, balancing work and responsibility, loyalty and sacrifice, while hiding her own struggles. In that moment, he understood the depth of her humanity, the resilience of a person who faced life with courage despite the obstacles. She was more than a maid, more than a background figure in his orderly life. She was a person with dreams, fears, and boundless strength, a human being he had overlooked for years, and now he could no longer ignore. The realization was humbling, a mirror reflecting his own life of control and detachment. He had wealth, power, and influence, yet he had never been tested in the way she had been. The struggles she endured daily, unseen and unacknowledged, made him question the very way he had lived. He felt a shift inside himself, an awakening of empathy, of understanding, and of deep, sincere respect. For the first time, he did not feel like a billionaire surveying his domain. He felt like a witness to courage, endurance, and love, watching her care for another human being, sacrificing her own comfort without complaint. He felt a mixture of awe and sorrow, and he knew his life would never feel the same again. Whatever he had believed about control, power, or understanding was now incomplete, shattered by the raw truth of her life. And in that quiet hospital room, with only the soft hum of machines and the whisper of her voice, the billionaire understood a truth that no amount of money could teach him, that wealth cannot replace compassion, status cannot measure strength, and privilege cannot reveal the hidden struggles of those around him. He had discovered the heart of humanity, beating quietly, fiercely, in someone he had long overlooked, and it broke him in the most profound way. The billionaire stepped back from the doorway, his heart still heavy from what he had just witnessed. The image of his maid kneeling beside the frail figure in the hospital bed refused to leave his mind. It replayed over and over like a scene etched into his memory. Her dedication, her courage, her quiet strength, it all collided with his own life of privilege and control, and for the first time, he felt a hollow emptiness where confidence and power usually resided. He walked slowly through the hospital corridor, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. Every step echoed with questions he had never asked himself. How could he have lived so long without noticing the struggles of someone so close? How could he have assumed that his life of wealth insulated him from the realities others faced every day? The truth was undeniable. He had been blind, not to malice, but to empathy, and the realization stung more than he expected. In the quiet moments that followed, he began to replay memories from the mansion, small interactions that he had once dismissed as trivial, her polite nods, her calm efficiency, even the subtle signs of exhaustion he had ignored. Suddenly, they all took on a new meaning. He could see the sacrifices she had made, balancing her responsibilities at home with the invisible burdens of her personal life. He had never asked, never noticed, never paused long enough to consider that her loyalty came at a cost far beyond what he had imagined. Sitting in a quiet corner of the hospital lobby, he allowed himself to feel the weight of his own ignorance. A pang of guilt settled deep in his chest, heavier than any financial loss or failed business deal he had ever faced. He had measured success by numbers, by assets, by control, but in this moment, he realized that none of it mattered when weighed against the depth of human resilience and compassion. The maid's life had taught him a lesson he could not ignore, that courage is often quiet, and strength often invisible. He thought about the barriers his wealth had created, walls that separated him from the very humanity he now craved to understand. He had spent decades in luxury, surrounded by people who obeyed him, admired him, and envied him, yet he had never truly connected with anyone in a meaningful way. The hospital, with its stark corridors and quiet beeping of machines, revealed a world untouched by money. A world of raw emotion, struggle, and unspoken love, and he was suddenly aware of how isolated he had allowed himself to become. The billionaire reflected on his own life choices, the routines he had valued, the control he had wielded, and he realized how hollow it had all been. There had been no challenge, no raw confrontation with the fragility of human life, no exposure to the sacrifices that defined the people who surrounded him. Until now, he had been living in a bubble, thinking that influence and wealth were the ultimate measures of understanding. But this revelation shattered every illusion he had held. He thought about her, how she had persevered, how she had cared for another human being while hiding her own struggles, how she had maintained her composure, her dignity, and her loyalty, despite the weight on her shoulders. The billionaire felt a mixture of awe, sorrow, and deep respect. He understood that her courage was not performative, not done for recognition, but born from love, responsibility, and unwavering determination, qualities that could never be bought or commanded. In that moment of reflection, he felt a shift within himself, a subtle but undeniable awakening. He realized that true empathy required awareness, that compassion demanded humility, and that wealth, no matter how vast, could not replace the understanding that comes from seeing the world through another person's eyes. He began to question everything about his life, his priorities, his assumptions, and the way he had treated those around him. And yet, beneath the guilt and the reflection, there was a spark of something else, hope, a hope that he could change, that he could use what he had learned to become a better person, not just richer in money, but richer in understanding, in kindness, and in connection. He understood now that the world he had lived in so comfortably was only a fraction of reality, and that the human stories hidden in plain sight held lessons far greater than any fortune. For the first time in years, the billionaire allowed himself to feel vulnerable, to feel small, to feel human, and in that vulnerability, he found clarity. He understood that the journey he had begun by following his maid to the hospital was only the beginning, a doorway to a deeper awareness, and he resolved, quietly but firmly, that he would never look at his life, or the people in it, the same way again. The billionaire left the hospital that day with a weight on his shoulders, but also with a newfound purpose. The world he had known, the mansion, the wealth, the comfort, suddenly felt insufficient, hollow in comparison to the quiet bravery he had witnessed. He couldn't stop thinking about her, the maid who had carried so much silently, and he knew that he could no longer remain a passive observer in her life. He began with small gestures, carefully considered, meant not to embarrass her but to offer support. He started by arranging for the hospital bills to be covered anonymously, ensuring that the financial burden she had been quietly shouldering was eased. At first, he hesitated to tell her, unsure how she would react, afraid that pride or fear might prevent her from accepting help. But he realized that true compassion sometimes required action without recognition, and that waiting for permission was unnecessary. Next, he discreetly offered resources to make her life easier, arranging for flexible schedules so she could care for her loved one, hiring trusted helpers to assist with household chores, and even arranging for counseling and medical support for her family. Every step was measured, done with the awareness that dignity mattered as much as aid. He had learned that generosity without sensitivity could feel intrusive, and he wanted his actions to honor her strength rather than undermine it. When he finally approached her, it was with humility, not authority. He did not lecture, he did not demand gratitude, he simply expressed understanding and offered assistance. His words were simple, heartfelt, a reflection of the change he felt within himself. For the first time, he allowed himself to speak not as a master or employer, but as a human being acknowledging another human being. The effect was immediate, a subtle shift in her posture, a quiet smile, a sense of relief that went beyond gratitude. He also took time to listen, really listen, something he had rarely done in his life. He asked her about her experiences, her struggles, her fears, and he held space for her to speak without judgment or interruption. Each story she shared deepened his respect. Each revelation reminded him that human resilience was often invisible, yet boundless. The lessons he had ignored for years now became impossible to ignore, written clearly in her eyes and her voice. The billionaire found himself learning patience and humility in ways he had never experienced. He realized that his wealth, while powerful, could only do so much. It could not buy courage, love, or resilience. He marveled at her ability to face hardship with grace, and he felt a growing desire to match her strength with acts of kindness, not grand gestures of pride, but quiet, meaningful actions that truly made a difference. Over time, their relationship subtly transformed. No longer was it a simple employer-employee dynamic, it became a bond built on trust, respect, and genuine care. He began to see her not as someone who served him, but as a person whose life and heart mattered. His awareness expanded beyond his walls, beyond his wealth, and into a realm of empathy and understanding he had never thought possible. He even started to reflect on how he treated others in his life, realizing that the lessons from her courage could extend far beyond the mansion. His actions became deliberate, thoughtful, and guided by a desire to uplift rather than control, to support rather than assume, and to recognize the humanity in everyone. In helping her, he discovered a way to heal parts of himself that had long been numb to real connection. By the end of this journey of compassion, he understood something vital, that wealth alone is meaningless without empathy, that power without understanding is empty, and that the simplest acts of kindness can transform lives, not only for those who receive them but also for those brave enough to give. He had stepped into a world of vulnerability and emerged changed, ready to carry the lessons of courage, compassion, and love into every part of his life. And as he watched her walk with a sense of relief and quiet strength, he knew that his life, too, had been irrevocably altered, not because of money, influence, or control, but because of a single act of bravery that opened his eyes to the heart of humanity, a heart he vowed to honor with every decision, every action, and every day that followed. In the days that followed, the mansion felt different, not in its walls or its furniture, but in the quiet shift that had taken place between its inhabitants. The billionaire walked through rooms he had known for years and saw them with new eyes, noticing details he had once ignored, noticing the people he had once overlooked, and understanding for the first time that wealth was not just about control, but about responsibility, empathy, and connection. The maid continued her routines, but now there was a subtle ease in her movements, a lightness born from the support she had been offered. She no longer carried the burdens of her secret alone, and though her strength remained remarkable, the billionaire could see her relief, the small moments where she could breathe without fear or worry. The mansion felt warmer, more human, because the walls were no longer barriers, but spaces shared with understanding and respect. Their interactions transformed naturally, gently, without ceremony or grand announcements. He began to value her presence not merely as someone who kept the house running, but as a person with her own story, her own struggles, and her own worth. Every conversation carried weight, every gesture became meaningful, and the invisible bond of trust and gratitude grew steadily, quietly, yet unmistakably. The billionaire realized that true relationships are built not on authority or hierarchy, but on care and recognition. He also began to notice changes within himself, subtle but profound. The constant drive for control and perfection had softened, replaced by a desire to listen, to understand, and to act with compassion. He found himself reflecting more, questioning more, and seeing life not as a series of transactions and achievements, but as a web of human connections, fragile, precious, and often unseen. The lessons he had learned from her courage and sacrifice became guiding principles in his life, shaping his decisions and actions in ways he had never imagined. Word of his discreet acts of kindness spread quietly through the household, not as gossip, but as subtle shifts in atmosphere. Staff members who had once felt invisible began to feel acknowledged, valued, and respected. The billionaire's transformation inspired small changes in others, acts of care and consideration that rippled through the mansion in ways he had not anticipated. What began as one person's quiet heroism had now ignited a broader awareness, a recognition that strength, sacrifice, and dignity deserve acknowledgement. Outside the mansion, life continued in its usual rhythm, but for the billionaire, everything had changed. He no longer measured success solely in numbers, deals, or appearances, but in the impact he could have on people's lives, in the moments where he could ease a burden, offer support, or simply witness the courage of someone he once overlooked. Wealth had given him comfort, but empathy gave him meaning, and he discovered a sense of fulfillment he had never known. The maid, too, carried the story forward in her own way, feeling the quiet reassurance that she was no longer invisible, that her struggles mattered, and that her courage had been honored. She continued to care for her loved one, to navigate the challenges of life, but with the knowledge that someone she trusted could share the load, that her resilience did not have to be solitary, and that human connection could be a source of strength, not judgment. The mansion itself, once a symbol of isolation and detachment, now became a place of quiet humanity, a space where wealth met empathy, and where lives intersected not through obligation, but through understanding. The billionaire and the maid shared a bond that transcended roles, titles, and assumptions, a bond built on mutual respect, gratitude, and the unspoken understanding of sacrifice and courage. In the end, the billionaire realized that the true lesson of this story was not about wealth, status, or control, but about the power of seeing and honoring the humanity in others, about the profound impact that compassion, empathy, and simple acts of kindness can have on a person's life. He had followed her out of curiosity, but he returned with humility, gratitude, and a heart changed forever. And as he watched her move through the mansion, tending to her tasks with the quiet strength he had come to admire, he understood that his life had been irrevocably transformed, not by money, not by possessions, but by the courage, resilience, and heart of one person who had shown him what it truly meant to live. And in that understanding, he found a lasting impact, a shift in his soul that no wealth could ever replicate, a reminder that sometimes the most profound lessons come from the quietest heroes.